had changed over recent years. Decades upon decades had passed. The English colonists had already arrived to America and founded the 13 original colonies, which we all know today. However, what you don't know is that before the colonists had arrived, they took the term for the words because Native Americans were already living on the land in the first place. When they claimed North and South Carolina, they began making slave rates deep in the southeast. Many years later, in the 1830s, President Andrew Jackson had the idea of Indian removal during his service as president. But who originally came up with that idea? Believe it or not, it was not Andrew Jackson, it was in fact this man. This is President Thomas Jefferson, who had the idea of Indian removal back in 1802. Perhaps they knew each other. Many bad things happened before the Indian Removal Act, starting back around 1803. When France offered land, Jefferson purchased that land, which we know as Louisiana. Why did they do that? So they had more places to manage Indians. Because of Andrew Jackson's vigorous spirit, the act was officially passed in 1830. Here are the details of all the removals. The first tribe to be removed was the Choctaws. Choctaw Indians were very good people. However, it was very devastating to see them go. The Choctaw removal was underway in the freezing, deadly winters of 1831 to 1832. A large removal was planned for each winter for the 3 years until the Choctaws were removed. Keep in mind that the Choctaw Indians had to walk a very long distance in the snow, completely barefoot with almost nothing. The second tribe to be removed was the Chickasaw removal. The Chickasaw removal happened in the year 1834, even though it was supposed to occur in 1832. The law was negotiated in 1832, but it wasn't amended until 1834. The Chickasaws were smart and asked to bring their own supplies. However, they had to face rain and mud. A lot of them died, about 2,500 of them too. The third removal was the Muscogee removal. This took place in the year 1831 and went until 1835. Before the treaty was signed for the Muscogees to go, things were already bad. Before the treaty was even signed and made official, greedy colonists invaded the Muscogees' home and basically kicked them out. In 1836, about 15,000 people were rounded up, and about 2,500 of them were classified as hostiles and put in chains and forced to march west from 1836 till 1837. This killed almost all of the Muscogees. The fourth tribe to be removed was the Seminole tribe. This went from 1835 to 1836. The Seminole left Florida and were forced onto boats that sailed into Louisiana and then north. Many of them refused to be removed, so they were removed by force. The fifth and final tribe to be removed, the Cherokee removal, 1836 to 1837. In 1835, the last treaty was signed and put into action. The treaty was supposed to force the Cherokee to move west. A large majority, including Chief Ross, leader of the Cherokee, refused to move or follow the treaty. In 1839, about 7,000 U.S. troops were sent to the Cherokee Nation and rounded up most of the Cherokee. The Cherokee were held in prison camps, living under nightmarish conditions. They were forced to move march in 1838 to 1839. They called this Nunadwala-Stuni, which means Trail They Cried at the Trail of Tears. The aftermath, 1837 to 1840. After all the depressing removals, the Civil War ran on in America. After the war, the Indian territories were all abolished. The president decided to focus his attention toward the western tribes. There were countless wars in the West despite background knowledge of the tribes living in the West in the first place. A more particular area in the West that attracted settlers was Oregon. The Oregon Territory was acquired by Great Britain in 1864. In the 1850s, war broke out around Puget Sound. Typically, the government created a reservation on land that was difficult to develop economically. In the dishonorable record of our dealings with the Indians, there is perhaps no blacker chapter than that relating to the Seminole people, who for many years have lived in a state of peace, broken only at intervals by slaving raids of Georgians. Grant Foreman. I have no other proof to explain why Mr. President Andrew Jackson decided to think of the Indian Removal Acts. However, let's hope nothing like this ever happens again. Thank you for joining me on the Shames of Early America, the Indian Removal Acts of 1830.
how does the Trail of Tears relate to the theme of this year of exploration, encounter, and exchange?
Well, all of the tribes that were forced to move encountered all these deadly conditions and encountered death and misfortune and sadness. They were able to survive, some of them, so they exchanged their story and told people what they had to go through. And encounter, exchange, and
Exploration.
they weren't all ever able to explore these lands, but however, President Andrew Jackson kind of got to explore where he could send these people away.
Usually when we think of Indian removal, we think of President Andrew Jackson. So I'm assuming based on your comments or answers to the other questions that that's where you started. Could you please explain a little bit about what led you then to exploring these other Indian removals that branch off from that usually are not covered in history books?
Because sometimes I wonder if people that have died are forgotten so easily, and it really hurts me to know that people are forgotten, so I decided to explore the other removals to let people know that it wasn't just the Cherokee, it wasn't just the Muskies, it was more than just these people. It was almost 1,000 people that had died. Almost like 100,000 if I counted right.
Okay.
What made you choose the documentary format?
I love presenting things and I love making presentations, and I'm used to presenting, and I really think that the documentary can express things and can show you things that you wouldn't be able to get from maybe a paper.
Something you touched on right at the end of your presentation is that the Civil War broke out kind of right after the removals. Are there any connections that you see between those two things?
Like, maybe some people thought that the Indian Rule Acts were wrong and maybe wanted to start a war against, what had happened. So the only downside is that when the Civil War happened, of course, the Indian territories were abolished, as I had stated. So I think Civil War does connect to the Indian Rule Acts with the way some people felt about the Indians.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yes.
Do you have your process paper?
I handed it to you.
We have a bibliography.
But the process
I'm
paper
not
is
sure if we have
here.
your paper.
Printed out what you had.
I don't think I have it.
Maybe on the
Okay.
computer.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much.